Perlove, and I know that life hasn't been the same for any of us since the arrival of the Vistiors. Many people have been telling me that I look a lot like Anna, the leader of the aliens. The aliens are able to assume a human appearance because they learned a technique for literally duplicating human DNA. Now, in order to do that, they had to start with an actual human DNA sample. And my DNA was the sample that was used to create Anna. 13 years ago, when I was a flute student in Paris, for reasons I will never really fully know, I was targeted by the aliens. I was actually abducted. I was practicing my flute in my dorm room one day, and there was suddenly this intense silence. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And I was drawn outside as I was abducted and taken aboard. Once I was aboard, I was interviewed and studied and analyzed, and eventually my DNA was taken. There were humans on the ship, and I could never tell if they were real humans or if they were aliens who had already undergone the humanization process. But I can tell you for sure that I was not meant to survive my abduction. What happened one day is I was pretty sure they were preparing my execution, and there was this machine. I don't know what it was supposed to do, but it was pretty clear to me that it was going to be the source of my execution. And there was this one person. He looked human. I didn't know if he was human for sure or not, but I thought he was some kind of a scientist because he never spoke, and he was always working on different equipment and machines, but he was working on this machine, and there were aliens in and out of the room. And I had my flute with me when I was abducted, and I had until this time never played it. But I was in this room, and I was just waiting, and as far as I knew, I was just waiting for my own death. And so I started to play my flute, and I played, I'll never forget, the Bach Sicilian from the Sonata in E-flat major, one of the most beautiful pieces ever written. And I played it, and I was crying while I played, which was not easy to do. And it was hard to breathe, but I kept playing. And the weirdest thing started to happen, which was the aliens started to collapse. And I stopped playing, and then they started to get up. And suddenly the one figure, that human scientist person, he looked up at me, and he said, "Play, keep playing." So I started playing again, and the same thing happened. The aliens collapsed. And he started screaming at me, "It's the flute, keep playing." So I kept playing, and he came up behind me, and he started pushing me forward. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know if he was an alien who was going to kill me or what was going on, but he pushed me into this room that looked like an elevator. And he was just screaming, it's the flute, keep playing." And then he was pushing these buttons of a machine, and he started pushing some buttons, and the door closed. And then the next thing that I knew, I was in the Parc Montsouris in Paris. And I was sitting on the grass with my flute in my hand, and I was shaking so much I almost dropped it. And there was no spaceship. It was just a normal evening in the park. And so I walked home, and I realized that no time had passed since my abduction, on Earth at least, and I am sure from my calculations that I must have been gone at least a month. And the fact that no time had passed on Earth was the one thing that made me really think that I must have hallucinated the whole thing, that it had to be some kind of a psychotic episode. And it's really a strange feeling when you wish that you've had a psychotic episode, because the thought that it was real is worse than thinking that you're losing your mind. The Vistiors, they're not our friends. They're not here in peace. They're here to destroy us. Remember when Anna said that the Vistiors had evolved past feeling negative emotions so that they could only feel positive emotions. Well, that's not entirely true. The visitors have evolved to suppress their emotions. And in doing so, this has allowed them to attain a much higher level of intelligence than humans are ever capable of achieving. Because in human beings, our emotional mind is always functioning in balance against the intellectual reason in our mind. And we can only see things in terms of our own perspective, which is always clouded by emotion. By completely suppressing their emotional brain, they have an intellectual capacity which far exceeds anything humans are capable of. And I have discovered there is only one weapon that works against the visitors, and that is, for some reason, the sound of a flute. When it's played by a human, and when it's played with emotion, for some reason it functions as like a key that unlocks the repression that they've had, and it so overwhelms them because they are not capable of processing emotions anymore that it literally destroys them. Now, the visitors are capable of producing music and of listening to other visitors produce music. And in fact, it was made clear to me that when I was aboard, that the reason, or one of the reasons I was selected to be the human twin of their leader was that they had spent hundreds of years studying human society and literature and history and culture, and they somehow locked on to the fable of the Pied Piper. And so they thought this would be a tool that they could use against humans. But what they didn't realize was that when a human produces the music, it has 10 times or 100 times the impact on them, and that it actually destroys them. So many of you think that I've been spending the last 2 years posting flute videos on YouTube simply because of my joy and passion for flute playing and flute music. And, well, that's only partially true, because what I've really been doing these past 2 years is establishing the first stage in the resistance. I'd hoped this day would never come, but it has. And I knew that when it would come, that we had to be ready. And I had to have the largest network in place of flutists so that we would be ready to take up this battle against the visitors. If you are a flute player, you need to practice and practice and practice all the time, as much as you can. You need to give concerts. You need to form chamber groups. You need to get other flutists to practice. You need to play the flute, and you need to play it with emotion, because it's the emotional component that destroys the visitors. We have reason to believe that the visitors may be susceptible to other instruments besides the flute. So if you don't play the flute and you can't get to a flute to start playing the flute, then start learning another instrument. School music teachers, your day has come. The times of being underappreciated are over. You are now the generals in the army. You have the power to save Earth and all humanity. You are the hope for the future. Pick up your flute, pick up your instrument, make a video of yourself performing, upload it as a video response to this video so that we can keep the music playing in a continuous loop at all times. Now, I do have to tell you about some security issues. We do have reason to believe that there are aliens on Earth, humanized, posing as musicians. If you know of a musician who can play but who can't listen, be very suspicious. They could be a visitor. If you know a musician who plays but who doesn't play with human emotion, be very suspicious. They could be a visitor. I also need to tell you that I have reason to believe that Anna has figured out a way to hack into my YouTube account, into my Facebook, into my Twitter, into my website, into all my social networking. Be careful. She may be posting videos posing as me. But I will tell you, Anna is my clone, but she is a poor substitute for me. We are of peace always. But this is war.